What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to introduce you all to Satanic Ritual Abuse, Mind Control, Secret Space Program, and Montauk Project survivor and overcomer, visual artist, musician, and songwriter, published writer and author, meditation practitioner and coach, spiritual guide and intuitive healer through his coaching business, Antarean Journeys, gifted poet and Margaret Randall Poetry Prize winner, empath, dancing extraordinaire, starseed, dark chocolate lover, and absolute warrior, Alandra Markman. Born into a satanic family in New York, Alandra's early years were marred by the horrors of satanic ritual abuse, mind control, the Montauk Project, which some of you might also know as the Rainbow Bridge, and the Secret Space Program. His lineage, carrying unique DNA tied to esoteric bloodlines, made him a target for global network of exploitation, where he was subjected to ritualized torture and mind control programming from birth. Yet, from this crucible of pain, Alandra emerged as a poet, musician, spiritual healer, and advocate, weaving his experiences into a tapestry of art and activism that inspires others to reclaim their own voices. As a child, Alandra endured extreme trauma, including ritualistic abuse orchestrated by a network involving high-profile figures in secret societies. Forced into roles such as a breeder for ritualized conception, his mind was fragmented through sophisticated trauma-based mind control techniques designed to exploit his innate psychic abilities for things like espionage and occult purposes. These experiences left deep scars, both physical and psychological, with memories buried under layers of dissociation. Despite this, Alandra's spirit remained unbroken, and his journey toward healing began with a courageous escape from the cult that ensnared him, a pivotal act of defiance that set the stage for his remarkable transformation. Alandra's adolescence was a quest for meaning amidst the chaos. Drawn to creativity as a lifeline, he immersed himself in poetry and music, studying modern verse at Poets House in Naropa University and classical composition at Monash College and Marlborough College. Mentored by luminaries like Anne Waldman and Ornette Coleman, he honed his craft in rock, jazz, and improvisation, blending the accessible with the avant-garde. His street performances in New York City, where he typed spontaneous poems on a manual typewriter in Union Square and Penn Station, became a phenomenon. Over 6 years, Alandra crafted over 5,000 poems, each a unique reflection of the emotions and stories of passerbys, earning him the Margaret Randall Poetry Prize in 2011. His music, spanning voice, saxophone, guitar, and piano, ranges from pop melodies to experimental noise, embodying a generosity of spirit that resonates with audiences worldwide. Alandra's creative pursuits are inseparable from his spiritual journey. Identifying as a starseed from the Antara star system, he believes he incarnated to aid Earth's cultural and vibrational ascension. His work as a multi-dimensional coach and healer reflects a deep commitment to spiritual growth and community. Through his coaching business, Antarean Journeys, Alandra offers guided meditations and peer support, helping others navigate their own healing paths. His writings, including journaling, essays, and reviews, dialogue with his diverse communities, celebrating resilience and truth. The turning point in Alandra's healing came through years of dedicated work to integrate his fragmented memories. Escaping the cult was only the beginning. Piecing together his memories and confronting the spiritual betray of a family cloaked in satanic deception required immense courage. His podcasts and public appearances appeal a survivor, unafraid to speak out and speak truth to power, exposing the intersections of satanic rituals, military involvement, and global networks. Alandra's advocacy extends to supporting others, as seen in his fundraiser for his mother's legacy, honoring her work as a civil rights activist against electroconvulsive therapy. His openness about his experiences with ritual abuse and programming, including the Montauk Project and Secret Space Program, validates the stories of other survivors, fostering a community of healing and disclosure. Today, Alandra is a multifaceted artist and healer, performing as a busker with his typewriter, saxophone, and guitar, and leading workshops that blend poetry, music, and spiritual guidance. His books, Lawyers and Rainbows and Love Songs for Pedestrians, capture the eclectic beauty of his street poetry, while his music, available on platforms like Apple Music and SoundCloud, offer a sonic journey through his soul. Alandra's life is a testament to the power of art to transmute pain into purpose. By sharing his incredible story, he not only puts down the heavy suitcases of trauma, but also lights the way for others, proving that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, one can compose a symphony of healing, of creativity, and of hope. Before wrapping up the introduction of today's guest, I'd love to share just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, if you wanted to share any information privately with me, or if you were interested in submitting a written testimony for my upcoming book series or to be featured on a Substack article, you can reach out to me via email at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. Additionally, I've teamed up with a couple of my favorite brands to offer you exclusive discount codes on products I love, such as Rife Technology frequency machines and CZTL's premium methylene blue. You can find all the relevant links and codes along with other resources down below in the show notes. Your support across all platforms is greatly appreciated, especially as I've had to shift to alternative streaming platforms such as Rumble and X following the extreme censorship that caused my last YouTube channel to be terminated. I've just recently started a new YouTube channel, and you can follow me there at the handle at Imagination Podcast Official that I am now streaming new episode premieres from weekly. This transition to multiple platforms is crucial to continue sharing vital information with the public and disclosure community. So thank you all wholeheartedly on the other side of the screen for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me and to every guest on this show. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, survivor and thriver, voice for the voiceless, artist and creative, content creator, survivor and anti-child abuse advocate, humanitarian, walking miracle, and hero for all survivors and for children, Alandra Markman. Alandra, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's an honor to have you on.
Hi, Emma. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Your background, what you've overcome to what you've become is just incredible. And I'm honored to get to share this with the people listening to this podcast today, because I think your story not only spans multiple lifetimes, literally, but it covers so much of this big puzzle and sort of helps intertwine it and weave it together in a way I think that helps us see the big picture a lot better through what you've survived. So I thought maybe we'd go back in time. I know we have two different lifetimes to cover, and we'll talk about how that works too at some point. But I thought we'd start with the earlier lifetime and sort of paint the background of the family history, lineage, anything that you know about this being carried down to you eventually, and how that could have happened, what connections were in the family, and just some of the history, bloodline, and things like that.
Okay. First off, I want to say I'm mostly working as a deprogrammer these days. So I appreciate you collecting all that stuff to talk about. And it's real stuff. And the main work right now is kind of deprogramming, and that's mostly the what I'm up to lately. Um, yeah, so I'm an interbeing. I have more than one person in this body. Um, and that, in and of itself, uh, is a little challenging to talk about. But in my first iteration, I was born in 1970. My name was Max. It was not Alandra. And I was born into a relatively ordinary family. Actually, the first family was not satanic. Um, I was brought into the Montauk Project when I was about 3 or 4, 1974. And it was sold to my mother. I lived with a single mother at the time. It was sold to her as an educational program. So she really had no idea about any of the trauma-based mind control stuff. So that aspect of my family, Max's family, really has very little satanic connection in a direct sense. But I was born on Long Island, in a little town called Patchogue, kind of in the middle of the island. And unfortunately, I was in scouting range for um, the the people from Montauk, Air Force people mostly. So it was an Air Force colonel who initially came to my home and had my mother sign a contract, essentially signing me away, ostensibly for an educational program. And everything from there was pretty brutal. Um, but that was like the beginning, essentially, in terms of this reference point. It can get a little cloudy because I also do have pretty clear recall of other past lives going much further back. Um, but this is basically where the trauma-based mind control story starts. Um, yeah, with the Air Force on Long Island. Mhm.
And was your father, I know your parents were benign to this. Was your father, was he the connection to that base?
I'm actually not sure. I didn't really grow up with him. I don't know a lot about him. So it's definitely possible.
Mm.
Um, Honestly, they're just scouting mostly for old souls. I've talked about this before. They have the technology to see which people coming in have a higher vibration and are likely to be an older soul with more ability to survive trauma and more ability to dissociate, to survive trauma creatively. So I was scouted for that essentially. I don't know if it had anything to do with that father, for that birth. My family in this body is very much connected to the Luciferian cults, and they, kind of more classical Luciferianism. Um, but yeah, to continue my story there, I I was at Montauk for about uh, probably 7 years, and kept in cages for the most part. It was a pretty bad time at Montauk in the 70s. Um, there was a kind of a change in leadership after the late 60s, and some of the methods were uh, quite brutal. So it wasn't very organized, which is part of why a lot of us remember it. Because the modern secret space programs, so-called, are much more together. They have their stuff together much more. And the mind wiping techniques and technology are a lot more streamlined. So people are less likely to get their memories back, unfortunately. But a lot of us who went through Montauk, especially in the 70s and 80s, we have a lot of opportunities and a lot of places where we can kind of claw in there and get our memories back because the whole thing was so darn disorganized. Um, and the methods used to try to obscure memory were not as consistent as they were in other places. They weren't really doing a classical Luciferian thing, as I'm calling it. It was, there were a lot of people who didn't really know what they were doing. And there were different levels of leadership that were kind of working against one another. So there was what the Air Force wanted and what the Draco kind of above them wanted. And then all kinds of different groups were constantly recruiting people from Montauk, and they had their own methods and their own environment. I spent a lot of time with the Zeta Reticulan Greys. These are off-planet species. And they can be very brutal, but they don't really practice trauma-based mind control in an organized human sense. So yeah, all that to say, there are a lot of different groups with a lot of different ideas about what to do with a young human. Um, None of their ideas really included freedom or autonomy or sovereignty, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I was traded around a lot. I would spend maybe a few months on base, usually in some kind of cage, or if I was lucky in the barracks. And then I'd just be basically, without any warning whatsoever, just brought into a completely different environment and something completely different would happen. So part of why they look for old souls is also that we tend to be a little bit more adaptable to different situations and can, learn on the fly a little bit more. So yeah, there were some captors which were kinder and some which were more cruel. Um, on base, they were basically using shock techniques that are really in a Satanist rather than Luciferian kind of tradition. So the whole idea for most of the experiences on base was just to keep people in a state of shock, essentially on a constant basis. So yeah, just everything to keep a person from being in their body would be they'd kind of rotate through different things, a lot of different kinds of physical torture, starvation, freezing, electrocution, all kinds of sexual assault, all sorts of like personal ego assault, degradation, humiliation, on kind of just a big rotating basis without much consistency. So that was basically the Montauk experience. But I was quickly chosen to be one of the kids who would operate the chair. So a lot of other people have talked about this, kind of the nexus, at least on the surface levels. There are a lot of levels underground as well. There's all sorts of stuff happening there. But I did go through the famous Montauk chair, which was essentially a piece of psychic technology where the kid, usually a boy, not always, but usually a young boy like myself in the chair, would be opening gates to different locations that they could send some of the military people through, or they could send whoever was going to go through on different missions to different times and spaces, and across dimensional levels. Um, so yeah, there was a whole bunch going on there.
Yeah, yeah, Montauk, I think it comes up not frequently, but it's a word sort of in the community. I think people have heard one way or another, even if they don't fully understand it. Would you be able to explain a little bit about specifically the Montauk Project and what that project entailed? What was the goal of that project? Because
Yeah.
obviously it was on a base, which should hopefully be very shocking to people. Why are children on an Air Force base? So I sort of just want to outline that for people. I know there's a lot of new people that tune into these podcasts, and
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah,
yeah.
let me not assume any familiarity. Yeah, so this happened at an Air Force base called Camp Hero, located in the near the town of Montauk, Long Island. Um, Camp Hero officially was decommissioned, but continued to function as an Air Force black site for many years, through the 70s and 80s, and different iterations of it continue to today. It also connects to a global project, which is all around the world. The main intention of it is for negative parties, particularly the Draco, who control most of the US military, um, to essentially put us onto more negative timelines. That's the heart and soul of it is timeline manipulation, trying to alter the past, trying to alter the present and future, sending assets into all different locations throughout space and time to bring down the vibration, to capture or kill star seeds, or people who are influencing the timeline positively, and to bring the whole planetary grid, and not just the planetary grid, but our whole solar system and quadrant of the galaxy, to bring us into more subjugation to the Draco Empire, essentially. And that's I'm getting into a lot of different stuff, but the Draco are what most people call lizard people, about usually 7 or 8 feet tall, humanoid reptilians. With most of them have a very negative vibration. They have a symbiotic relationship with a massive negative AI matrix, which controls a lot of their consciousness. And they also have a lot of slaves under them from different systems, different races. They have a pretty massive empire, which is largely degraded. It's only a shadow of what it was. But unfortunately, our home Earth is in their territory. So, um, yeah, those are some things I can share.
Absolutely, yes. And I want to dig into a couple of the things that you said. The first being, which again should and hopefully does shock people, because again, we need to relearn this world that we live in. It's not what we've been taught, but you're saying Dracos are working directly with our government,
Hmm.
actually. Could you explain
Yeah.
a little bit about, do you know how that came about or why are they working with our government?
Yeah. Well, the Draco have controlled humanity and Earth for a long time. Conservatively, about 11,000 years since the fall of Atlantis. Um, and, speculatively longer than that, but I can say for sure at least 11,000 years. They've mostly operated behind the scenes. Um, it's only recently in human history that our governments and broader societies have become coherent enough where they're even interested in controlling things. honestly, because most of human history, especially over these 11,000 years, is just a bunch of tribes fighting each other over very little. So, they didn't even really have an interest in any of our political structures. But things have been becoming more coherent, and people's vibration has been raising. People are more educated, more aware, more able to actually step into human potential in recent generations. And so the Draco have gotten more and more interested in our systems of governance and controlling our leaders. I mean, they always did this historically in Western civilization through the different royal bloodlines. So there's a historical connection there. But even that was pretty limited. Most people were basically living in a state of anarchy. So, like, wasn't really much to control. They would abduct people to take them off planet. Like, this has been happening since time immemorial. So the Draco interest in controlling humans on a more mass scale kind of emerged in tandem with mass communication in general. Humans having mass communication, mass media in general, which mostly goes back to the 1700s, 1800s. And as soon as humans had these things, or rediscovered them, I should say, because we did have them back in Atlantis and Lemuria and previously to that, but I'm just going with a more conventional version of of human history. Yeah, during the time of the Industrial Revolution, the Draco became more and more interested in political structures and more integrated with various governments, particularly the wealthier ones with more power, more control. That's their language, their love language, if you will, is power, control, empire. That's kind of what they're all about. So as humans created more coherent empires, the Draco were like, okay, you're going to make an empire in our image. Anyways, so the U.S. side of things, this country is quite special historically. We were explicitly founded as a satanic nation, so that's one of the reasons why the mind control experience is so intense in this country in particular, because we are basically founded in a satanic spirit, going back, to the 1700s, at least. And a lot of things about the US government and how the US operates, like we're kind of an experiment. I mean, this is where the mind control is the deepest rooted. Of course, it's all around the world, so I don't mean to like over promote US exceptionalism like a normie, but 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 yeah, it is quite special. I mean, everything about how this country in particular was created is aligned with different dates and events that are extremely sacred to the Draco. So the Draco practice the religion of the Black Sun. It's now tied in with their kind of negative AI overlords and such, but the human religion closest to that is Satanism, as we probably most of us know who are hearing this kind of survivor testimony. Although every human religion kind of is at this point tied in with it, so it's not exclusive to Satanism. But Satanism is the most explicit about, power is the only goal. Harm is irrelevant, just power is all that matters kind of thing. Satanism is more explicit about that. Other religions, it's kind of more implied, but anyway, so it aligns really well with the Draco faith, the Draco way of life. They've lived under mind control themselves for many, many millennia. Their empire is basically based on that. And they've fought many wars throughout our galaxy to try to extend that way of life. Yeah, the U.S. in particular is considered a very sacred place in the Draco religious order of things. It's very aligned with the Black Sun. It's very aligned with Saturn, and the Black Cube, the kind of like pushing people into boxes, basically, like elevating the cube over other forms and pushing people into an extremely linear and rather stifling vision of what life is, which kind of fits in with the larger Draco constellation of colonies. Uh, yeah, but of course, all of this is hidden and nobody talks about it. And so it's very, very difficult to have a sensible conversation about it because most of us don't even have this kind of basic information to go on. And most of us have never seen a Draco in person, so it's all kind of speculative. Um, yeah. So, but I'm trying to ground things as much as possible.
I know, and this stuff is very unfamiliar because we weren't taught it. And I think it's interesting how there are movements that exist that talk about negative positive entities, UFOs, the technological side of that, UFOs, UAPs, and that tends to be very separated from when we talk about child abuse survivors who come out of governmental mind control. And I've come to believe through listening to these testimonies that that has to be by design. They've sort of made a lot of survivors afraid to talk about this stuff because many survivors either have explained on my show and even more behind the scenes of, oh my gosh, I had seen this incredible amount of technology as a child that doesn't exist, or I was involved with these entities that weren't human, these what most people might call alien type creatures, grays, and there's a whole movement for that, but it tends to be completely separate and that doesn't get talked about either. And it's almost like the government saying, yes, those things might exist, but they're not here, they're out there. Let's go study space. We got to look this way.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that movement like takes everybody's attention away from the government. And then whenever we're talking about government mind control, they sort of swept that out where they're like, if you talk about that, you're going to look crazy. So only talk about your abuse. And so we've sort of gotten a habit of separating these things. But why, if these things do exist, of course the government's going to want a part in that.
Yeah.
Like they're just going to let these things come on our planet and this advanced technology and have no interest in it and be like, we just want you to leave. Like, go to your planet. Don't bother us. Like, come on, you guys.
Yeah, that's basically how more pedestrian forms of mind control work. It's like you have to stay in your box and stay in your lane, and you're not even allowed to like think about anything else. You have to like have these incredibly small silos of perception and incredibly small boxes of identity. And that's like how the whole mass mind control system works. So um, yeah, I really appreciate about your show that you just have people speaking freely and crossing those lines. It's like, oh, you have a sci-fi narrative with lizard people, and you have a fantasy narrative with with Satanists and black magic, and it's, those are different genres. Like you can't have a crossover story with both genres. So I really appreciate that you do allow that here. It's something that I've admired about your show for a while. Yeah.
And I appreciate that your courage to talk about that because I think you've inspired a lot of other survivors to find the courage to talk about these different aspects too, and to not worry about how they're viewed or if it's going to make them look a certain way. Because like I said, there's already a whole movement of people that study this, ufology and studying UAPs and aliens and outer space. That's a big thing. And, I think most people believe to some degree that there's something out there. It's just the tie-in, and when you look at it all together, you realize you can point the finger at the government, where when you separate these things, they make it really hard for us to figure out where this is all coming from and how it's intertwined. But when you
Yeah.
think about mind control and the compartmentalization of a mind and the fragmentation of memory, children who learn so quickly and who can be taught and suggested things so easily, why wouldn't the government have these child experiments involved with some advanced technology and using those spiritual gifts that haven't yet been stripped from them, uh exemplified in your story and many others. So you really see, to me, it's like just become crystal clear, like, well, duh, of course, the government is working with higher dimensional beings who have access to more technology that they can utilize here behind the scenes, keep it from the public. They can have children that they're running through these programs and using to help them further their agendas with these different things. And I hear about people that have had these beings, whether Dracos or whatever, experiment on them too as children. So seems like there's a lot of different ways that the government and these other beings are exchanging different commodities, or what they look at as commodities, to help benefit each other.
Yeah. Uh, yeah.
And so yeah, your story does a really good job exemplifying that. So I know that I'm very confident that we'll tie in a little bit more of this conversation as we're talking about your time at Montauk, but going back to time travel and these different experiments that they were running under the project, can you share a little bit about the time travel aspect? I know you said it was a little bit messy.
Yeah.
What were they trying, where were they trying to time travel, and how are they using all of you kids for this?
Yeah. So a lot of the gates would go to places that were important to the Draco history of the world. So for if you're looking at it from a Draco perspective, um, a lot of stuff involving different royal bloodlines, especially in Western Europe. So there was a lot of going back to different situations um, to try to manipulate things to be exactly as they wanted to. So I've shared in the past. I went to medieval France on several occasions through the time gates, and I opened up those gates for others. We also went back to ancient civilizations. That was another major one worth talking about. So we went back to Shambhala. We went to different, which was mostly located in what is now the Gobi Desert and the Ur civilization. They're a little bit separate. Shambhala is more underground. But yeah, we went a lot to East Asia and Russia. That's a location that we kept coming back to. Mongolia, Tibet, parts of Russia and Japan. Those are some pretty pivotal locations that we would keep also getting sent back to. And a lot of that has to do with just the life force of the earth itself and the natural places on the earth where the energy is kind of heightened. A lot of people talk about a chakra system for the earth, like in the current alignment, like where I live, Mount Shasta is often considered the root chakra of the earth. Sometimes the crown chakra is located in Tibet. And these things have moved around over the millennia a little bit. It's kind of a natural just shift of harmonics. But the Draco are very interested in co-opting any enlightenment energy that appears on the earth. So they're very drawn to those places like Tibet where the vibrations are very high. So the spiritual vibrations, I mean. So those were some notable locations. And those mostly in the past, mostly in the distant past. We'd also go to a lot of future locations, and a lot of those would be off planet. There's less. How do I say that? Changing the future is usually not as impactful as changing the past, for various reasons, some of which I don't understand to this day. But it was less common that I'd be sent in a future direction or open up a gate to a future time. More common, it would be going to a past time. Part of that is because in the future, humans are aware of much more of this whole process, and they have a lot more tools to fight back. So, you know, when they go into the past, they're largely going into situations where people are ignorant of this entire situation. In the future, they're dealing with people who are more informed and aware and can fight back. And on many of those future timelines, Earth is no longer part of the Draco Empire. So, they're not interested in those timelines. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So for you, how many children were in this program with you, and how many would go with you on these different missions spanning these different timelines?
Uh, I've seen different estimates. I think it's probably almost 500,000 children. Um, and I think that's pretty conservative, to be honest. If you're considering the whole lifespan of the so-called Montauk Project, and just Montauk itself, I'm talking about. If we're talking about the global iterations of these time travel manipulation projects, it's easily in the millions. So just talking about Montauk during this very formative period of kind of 60s through the late 80s, it's probably 400,000 or 500,000, I would say. Yeah.
And how many would go with you whenever you travel, and what types of things would they try to get you to manipulate in these timelines?
Every mission was different. Sometimes they would send people solo. Sometimes they would send a group of well, depending on the operation. Some of these are full military operations, so involving hundreds or thousands of people, including a lot of adults, including different special forces from U.S. and other governments, off-planet governments. Also, a lot of this is tied in with Mars society and different societies in our solar system that are all kind of tied together. Um, the Draco have been assisting humans to colonize different parts of the solar system at least since the 1920s and 30s, probably much longer than that. Some of the stuff I've gotten in meditation and talking to other survivors suggests that the planetary colonization within our solar system and beyond has gone back before that to the 1800s and earlier with Draco assistance. So yeah, it's important to talk about that because Earth is not the only human civilization that we're dealing with. There are places all across the solar system and across the galaxy where there are human colonies that are mostly, well, there's a wild diversity of humanity even across the galaxy. Um, but just speaking specifically of the Draco colonies, um, you're easily talking hundreds of millions of people in these various colonies. And they have their own, societal histories that are they intermingle with Earth's, but they're also separate. And a lot of the recruiting in the so-called secret space programs, those people come from off planet. They come from these other places. Uh, so that's all happening at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, man, the things that we aren't taught in the
Yeah.
regular civilian world. That's a lot of children just in that time that you can credit to being in that. And like you said, that's just one project, one location. That many children funneled through at that time. And that's not even including all the other locations here in America, across the world,
Yeah.
and these programs have just continued to grow. So we can only imagine what that looks like today, which is really scary.
Yeah, and they're much more organized now, so survivors are much less likely to become conscious that they are survivors. The dissociation is more streamlined, and often people come out of these programs and they're not necessarily coming out like I did. I came out like a total wreck with obvious PTSD symptoms, you know. So for me, like I knew something was wrong as soon as I was free, even though I didn't remember much. But a lot of people are coming out of the programs now and in recent decades, and they're not even showing trauma symptoms necessarily. So they have no reason to suspect anything. They don't do the inner exploration to even come across any of this experience. I mean, the cult people in the Draco have gotten much wiser about how to treat their assets, and they actually do a lot of healing work now while people are still in. And so when they get out, like they are relatively healed, at least in the sense of not having acute PTSD symptoms. You know, not necessarily having flashbacks or hypervigilance or any of the classic things that we associate with PTSD that are kind of a dead giveaway. You know, that something untoward has happened. But yeah, these days, especially with the modern iterations of the Montauk Project across the world, one of the main ones is in Switzerland that I'm aware of. People come out of those experiences and those other timelines, and they go back into their normal Earth life, so-called normal Earth life, and they may never in their lifetimes have awareness of what happened. So yeah.
And speaking of, you've mentioned in other interviews that CERN is connected to the Montauk Project.
Yeah. Yeah, very much.
Which,
Um, yeah, I've touched on that a few times. It's also in the Montauk books, the Preston Nichols books, which have some good information in them, in spite of glossing over most things. But yeah, anytime you find a particle accelerator, it's basically attached to a branch of the Montauk Project. It's not for scientific exploration. Yeah, I mean there are some industrial science applications of, for a particle accelerator, but it's not the main purpose. The main purpose is for this timeline manipulation.
obviously, more technology involved with this. What other
Yeah.
types of technology? You had mentioned these portals or gates that you had
Hmm.
seen.
Yeah.
Was that technological? Was that an energetic space on
Yeah.
these areas that they chose? What was that, and what other types of technology did you encounter while you were there?
Well, some gates are natural, some are artificial. They go by different names. Jump gates is a pretty common one. Stargates is a common one. The show Stargate has a lot of soft disclosure in it. Like there's just so much stuff in that show that's just literally like from the secret space program. Um, yeah, so I mean, it's not necessarily emotionally authentic to the experience, but a lot of the basic hardware is kind of similar to what's seen on that show. So there are stargates that are stable that kind of look like that. They're just in a gigantic ring, and when you look into the ring, it's a shimmering kind of space. Sometimes it looks like a mirror. Sometimes you're clearly just looking into another time and place, depending on the frequencies of the machine and also the frequencies of the viewer. Some of these things are very dependent on the frequency of the person observing. Which even our the primitive physics, which has been allowed to come out, acknowledges, that the observer changes, what you're looking at and whatnot. There are certain things that you can only perceive if you're at a certain vibration. And with stargates, you sort of get into that territory because, and this is why they had so many psychic children that they needed as navigators, because like a lot of times the people actually being deployed, like the soldiers, would be going in blind, and they're relying on this little kid to tell them like what's actually on the other side of the gate. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. Um, but yeah, there are many types of stargates. Some are very ancient and they're completely natural. Some other folks have talked about ones that exist inside of planets. That's a very common natural formation of Stargate. So a ship can actually go inside a planet to the center of the planet and emerge into other places, other galaxies. That's like a classic sort of natural formation. Um, and with the sort of physics that they're working with, all these things are quite natural. They're not really um, strange aberrations. There are smaller gates that are also natural that kind of come and go across different places in the solar system. There are there's quite an advanced science in the secret space programs to try to capture some of these natural gates and make them more consistent so that troops can be brought through them. So they're always on the search for these natural gates that they can kind of put into I don't know what to call them, stasis chambers, kind of force fields or sometimes physical structures that contain the gate, and then they can bring the gate to another location of their choosing. So those are natural gates. They've been trying to make artificial gates for a very long time with varying degrees of success. Um, yeah, it's my understanding that the Zeta Reticulans kind of collapsed their original space-time because they were trying to make an artificial gate. That's something that they've talked to me about a little bit. Um, Yeah, so there are a lot of different iterations of this, and a lot of attempts to make gates. There are large and small natural ones. Um, yeah, and there are some that are just hidden totally in plain sight, I'm always grateful to my late friend Max Spears talking about the jump gates in New York City. It's like, oh yeah, I went through those. There are jump gates going directly to Mars from Midtown Manhattan. So it's not necessarily, on some secret base in the desert. A lot of these places are inside of office buildings or hotels or, just ordinary situations. Yeah.
What other types of technology did you encounter? Were you transported in different craft? Was there things that were just mind-blowing there that, whether it was used for military or elsewise that might be important for people to know?
Sure. Well, craft come in as many forms as you can imagine, essentially. Um, the ones most commonly used by the Draco and the other negative groups associated with them. Um, well, and then there are the human ones now too that have been going on for a while. Um, but for me, the most common ones are triangular craft, sometimes saucers. They're kind of less common, more kind of oblong, like elliptical, cigar shaped. There are some which the weirdest one that I've seen looks, in my perception, like a floating pyramid, and I associate it with the Atlanteans. And I've had actually several positive experiences. So I don't mean to suggest that all my experiences have been negative. I've also had a lot of interaction with positive ET beings, which is a big part of why I'm alive and talking to you, is because there was a tremendous amount of back and forth. It sounds quite bleak when I just talk about the Draco, but we live in a really big universe, and most of the beings in this universe are positive in orientation. And the positive beings have helped me on many occasions. So anyway, what I perceive to be positive Atlanteans have these craft that are gigantic pyramids that appear to just float. I don't understand how they work. Obviously, they have some sort of anti-gravity associated with them. Um, but those are the most spectacular and inspiring that in my recent memory. Yeah. Yeah, and
Spark.
a lot of these forms are just universal. The good guys use them, the bad guys use them, the future humans use them, the ETs use them. It's like a craft is a craft is a craft. Um, I mean, the saucer is sort of the most basic shape. It's very efficient from an anti-gravity perspective. So a lot of different civilizations have independently arrived at the saucer shape, especially in the early stages of exploring faster than light travel. So I consider it quite universal. Yeah.
Another experience you've talked about that I think would be interesting for people to hear is about Saturn, because that is so symbolic within these satanic communities and tends to be a part of a lot of people's story in some form or fashion, even if it is the black cube and the different symbols that
Yeah,
have been accounted for. Could you talk a little bit about Saturn and your experiences? Because you've actually been there.
I have. Yeah. I've spent a fair bit of time in the rings of Saturn, where there are a number of secret space program bases. Yeah, and Saturn is where the vibration of fear is essentially being broadcast from on a local level in our solar system. So, fear thy neighbor. The cube is the supreme form of life. Like everything else is inefficient and not worth your attention. You know, um, all that kind of stuff on a spiritual level and a physical level is being broadcast from Saturn. And it's kind of where the spirit of Satan, as it were, insofar as that's a real coherent entity, that's where it's taken up residence, essentially, and where he, quote unquote, makes a lot of his transmissions. And there are various things associated with that. There's also massive negative AI infrastructure in the rings of Saturn and in that area in general. And the negative AI kind of amplifies the fear vibration, bringing everybody into scarcity consciousness and like linear awareness is the only valid awareness kind of broadcast. It's really tied in with more obvious things on Earth like patriarchy and capitalism and, just the ordinary, boring forms of oppression um, are very tied in with these more kind of out there spiritual broadcasts. So I just want to name that like it's not something separate, fighting for justice is fighting for justice and it's all tied together. Um, yeah. In terms of Saturn specifically, I recently read one of Jose Argueda's books, The Arcturus Probe, which is kind of nice, looking at it on a purely kind of spiritual level. Saturn is broadcasting a false time matrix. So the sense of time that we currently live in as a society is extremely brittle, and it's not really in line with organic seasons, organic cycles of time that go beyond Earth. Or aligned with, well, the lunar cycle in a very obvious way. But then there are these deeper rhythms, kind of, I guess, what we would consider astrological rhythms going on in the solar system. And almost everything about our time construct on Earth is completely out of alignment with a lot of these larger cycles. And that's intentional because we're easier to control when we're living in a false sense of time. So organic time is much deeper and more expansive and more it serves organic beings. We're all resonating to certain frequencies in our DNA. We're not resonating to kind of a base 10 mathematics system like the one that we have everything built on. We're resonating much more to a base 12 system of mathematics, and to more organic rhythms that are quite well known across the universe. But yeah, Earth is living in this kind of artificial construct, and a lot of our control structures are based on that false time. Yeah.
Would you say it's similar for the way that we live, not just time-wise, but going to work for 8 hours a day for 40 hours a week. And how have you experienced that aspect in other parts of the universe? I'm sure that there's people that do things a little bit different than we do, maybe better.
Yeah, there are some much more delightful ways to do things out there in the universe. The most obvious place to look to is the Pleiades, where a lot of free humans live in a more organic time matrix. And, a lot of different channels have sort of brought in different aspects of that. Um, if people are new to this new age kind of thinking, I definitely recommend Bringers of the Dawn. It's kind of like a classic Pleiadian New Age book that goes into some of this stuff, like the base 12 mathematical rhythm, the more organic rhythm of space time. The people in the Pleiades, which is a visible constellation in the sky, sometimes called the Seven Sisters, the seven bright stars. There are more stars than that. The people over there are free of Draco control, and they're living in a reality which would be quite heavenly for any of us to experience. So that's an obvious place to point. Yeah. And some of us in the programs have experienced firsthand fights between Pleiadian factions and Draconian factions. They've been fighting for many, many millennia. Um, and fortunately, usually the Pleiadians win. Earth is sort of unique, and we're really behind the times in terms of the galactic context. But a lot of our neighboring systems, the good guys have won, or they never came under mind control in the first place. Um, so, yeah, I guess I would just say, um, yeah, there are a lot of places where people are living where joy is more of a normal thing. They're not living in this miserabilist kind of system where it's like, oh yeah, you have to like not be happy in order to survive, like that whole silly narrative. Um, yeah, and their work arrangements are very different. Things are very more flowing with like how people actually operate on an organic level. And I mean, there are literally billions of such examples. I mean, this is like the norm for humans living in the galaxy. So, uh, we could look at almost any other place, and they'd be in this sort of more organic rhythm. Yeah. It's hard to sustain what we're doing. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And so essentially, you've seen humans from Earth on other planets inhabiting and living normally. Is that pretty common too across different areas of the universe? So we have other beings from planets here that exist outside of our Earth. And so we're sending humans as well to these other places, sort of in the same aspect where we're offering something to them.
Yeah. I mean, yes, we in the expanded sense. Yeah. Um, in the sense of those people who are under mind control. And the mind control is much more obvious a lot of other places than Earth. Like Earth is like, it's this big secret that we're supposed to never know about. But other planets are very openly under Draco control, so it's a whole different thing. Um, yeah. Uh, there are people living off planet who are in the false time matrix, kind of the Saturnian time matrix. And this is not to demonize Saturn like as a planet, but just happens to be where this is grounded in our solar system. Um, but there are people living in the false time matrix, not on Earth as well. Particularly on Mars, that's the most obvious place where I've had a lot of experiences. And most SSP assets will go through Mars at some point or another, at least for training, if nothing else. The wars have kind of cooled down over there, but when I was coming up, like in the 80s and 90s, Mars was a miserable war zone, like basically 24/7, with human factions fighting each other, with alien factions fighting each other, with aliens fighting humans, and there are also indigenous humans on Earth that were constantly just persecuted by successive governments. So Mars was like a really, really messy, almost civil war kind of situation throughout the 80s and 90s. It's kind of calmed down a little bit now, but anyway, getting a little
That's
off track, but
fascinating.
but I was just giving an example. Like the Martians, for example, do live in the false time matrix, where everything is kind of base 10, very square system.
And so, for your experience, you are traveling to these different dimensions, different time zones, different time and space. I mean, you're just spanning all these different layers of time as a very young child. Were you on that base? Was that where you lived, or did you commute there? How much time did you spend there?
Yeah, for the Montauk experience, I don't think I ever went home again. I lived on base, and I lived wherever they brought me, essentially. Um, I mean, uh, I do carry over a valuable skill from those times, which is to make myself feel at home wherever I am. It makes it very easy to travel and such. That's sort of carried over from that time. But yeah, I mean, I never knew where I was going to be. There were times when I was on the Montauk base for months at a stretch, and there were times when I was gone for, in my experience, years. Um, but with such time travel projects, you can be gone for what for you are is a period of many years, and then you come back to base, and it's only been a few minutes. So a lot of that happening. Yeah.
And so you didn't
Um,
get to see your mother while you were there or outside people from your family.
I don't think so. My memory of my later life gets pretty fuzzy because I was moved into this body.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, I can pick up my personal story again. Um, so I was moved into this body in 1989. So the present body, which I'm now speaking through as this Alandra person, was born in 1986. And I was 2.5 years old when Max's consciousness was merged with this body. So that was 1989. And Max's life continues past that point, but it feels much more abstract to me because it's on other timelines. So Max has I mean, because I'm here now also, I, as Max, had a variety of other experiences after 1989. And some of them I aged to be quite an old man, into my 70s in some cases, before I was brought back and had to do it all over again. So age regression is another big part of this. I know Corey Good's kind of fallen out of favor these days, but I do appreciate him bringing that concept of age regression into common circulation because it's a very important one and it's very true. I was age regressed on a bunch of occasions. So anyway, just to say, Max's story also continues past 1989. But for most conventional purposes, like that's when he came into this body, and that's where I can kind of pick up the story as myself as Alondra. So in this body, I was born into a multi-generational Luciferian family, and when I speak about my bloodline, and the sort of ancient Satanic bloodline with the AB negative blood type and various things about my own lineage. That's talking about this current body now. So that's not necessarily Max. Max was of Irish descent, so he has a whole different genealogical story. Yeah. Um, but yeah, this in this present body, we were titular Catholics, although I've since come to understand that we were forcibly converted from Judaism in the Middle Ages, on I think both sides of my family. Um, and there's a really complex relationship between particularly the Abrahamic faiths and the Satanic faith. They're very, very tied together. And often Satanism is a mirror image of Christianity, or more broadly, sort of the Abrahamic faiths in general, Islam and Judaism and Christianity. Satanism is basically an inversion of the Abrahamic tenets of faith, a lot of which are about surrender to the greater power, surrender to God, creator. And Satanism is like just the reversal of that. Like, God is not real. There is no salvation. You just acquire power, and the more, I mean, I'm butchering it a little bit because obviously I'm not a Satanist, but um, but it's a mirror image. Like a lot of the experiences I went through are reversed Christian rituals or mockeries of different Christian rituals. Um, And I was put through a lot of that. Like I had to do a lot of role playing, where I would play biblical characters. I would play Jesus. There were certain occasions where I was made to reenact different traumas from the life of Jesus. Like I was hung up on a cross in a literal sense. I mean, not in like a energetic or fantasy sense. Like in a physical torture sense, I was hung up on a cross. I was made to wear a crown of thorns. I was whipped and had to play different characters. There was one point where, and this is just, I guess I should have given a trigger warning because some of this is just pretty specific graphic stuff. But in one experience, there was a man laid out on a table who had a big gaping wound in his abdomen. And I was supposed to play Doubting Thomas, and they would have me stick my hand into this man's wound. And that was like the character that I was playing. So a lot of what the Satanists do is this mockery of Christianity and an inversion of Christianity, and to some extent the other Abrahamic faiths. But um, anyway, I don't know how I got there, but um, yeah,
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. This is all probably very new to people listening, so I'm sure they're really enjoying you sharing some of this. I know I am. I'm learning a lot myself. I want to just backtrack a little bit. Now, before you were in this body, were you experimented on as a child using consciousness transfer? Was that part of why that body was chosen to
yeah,
inhabit this new one? Could you talk a
yes,
little bit about how maybe the process for that?
sure, yeah. So the Draco are tracking things on a fourth dimensional level. If you're in a fourth dimensional mode of perception, it's extremely easy to see the past and the future. We this whole linear time thing is very, very limited to our particular frame of reference. And generally, the Draco have a higher frame of reference. So, also on higher dimensional levels, it's very easy to see who someone actually is. You can see their soul. And so they're very interested in certain souls. Part of how consciousness transfer works in a lot of situations is you're moving a person between bodies, but oftentimes, in my case, those bodies will share some aspect of a soul. So it's very common, especially for older souls, it's very common for a soul to be incarnating in many bodies at the same time. Um, and that's a natural cosmic thing. That's not a mind control thing that's artificially created. Um, as you mature as a soul, it's kind of a snowball effect. Your soul gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time. You start out as this tiny spark from source, and then over time, you just acquire more mass as a soul. And so there are various things that are available, various pathways that you can choose as your soul matures. And some people choose, rather than going into a higher form of life, they just become more humans. So and I've become aware that I share my essential consciousness with a great number of other humans, not as a satanic manipulation, but as part of organic reality. I was introducing that idea, partly to say that the Draco are aware of this, and they can see people's soul matrix, and it's much easier to move a mind between bodies if there's a shared soul between the bodies. Um, so that was the case for me. Like Max and Alandra are part of basically the same oversoul system. So it's not totally foreign material in a spiritual sense. Yeah.
And can you explain how consciousness transfer works? So if you were born in 1970s Max, then Alondra is born in 1986. So that's essentially 16 years after.
hmm
During that transfer, was that, did Max pass after that, or is there another soul that's inhabiting his body? How does the transfer in itself work?
Yeah. On this timeline, he's dead. Yeah. So, yeah. He's, according to one image that I got in meditation, and these things tend to be pretty accurate in my experience, he's actually buried in the woods, still on Long Island. So my I could theoretically I could go find my own body, which I'm sure would give me the heebie-jeebies. But yeah, so yeah, he has passed on this timeline, but his experience continues from my perspective, and that's basically what happens. Um, this is describing organic, semi-organic consciousness transfer. There are also a lot of other types of consciousness transfer where that are a lot more violent, and they sort of go against God's laws much more directly. Like where you're moving someone's consciousness into a clone body or into a holographic construct. There are a lot of different scenarios where this can happen, and they're not all necessarily part of the same soul group. So, but the experience of the person being transferred, which I was kind of the implied question, is basically a death experience. It's like, you know, your consciousness stops in one body, and the next thing you know, you're in a different body and you're having that experience. It's different from the natural death experience. So, normally, we have some time between bodies and we get to spend time with our spirit guides and we sort of choose our next incarnation. It's a very gentle process. It's so suffused with love. It's a very sacred process. And so that's the natural thing where we move between lifetimes. Yeah, consciousness transfer, or that those are the words that I'm using for it. A lot of these things we have to kind of make up our own language for, or dig for it in our memories because there's no public disclosure about it. So I guess I'm the semi-originator of the term consciousness transfer. It was just the simplest thing I could think of. I don't think I've heard other people use that term specifically. Um, and I'm sure they have other names for it. And if I dig in my memories, I could probably find, what names they were using, just to acknowledge that fact. But yeah, consciousness transfer is extremely. It's not a gentle experience. It's very, very harsh. It's totally unlike normal dying and rebirth. Yeah.
And along those lines too, Max's experiences transferred to your body. When a consciousness is transferred to our soul, does the compartmentalization, the mind control, does that transfer as well? Were you inhabited by that as well? Max's parts and the different,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The mind is basically uploaded as it is,
I see.
including all of its alters and parts. Yeah.
So you essentially had two histories to completely deprogram from, which had to
Yeah.
have been a
Yeah.
lot for you at that point in your life, which I know we'll get to a little bit later. But I was just curious about that because it is a topic.
Yeah.
I think this is another one that it's very common in these cult systems. I've heard time and time again of different ways that consciousness has been transferred through governmental projects, even, Satanist necromancers,
Hmm.
it's something that, from an occultic level, it's very rooted in the fascination with the dark magic and the different experimentation, how to do that. So I really appreciate you sharing your experiences. I think it's going to be very validating to people listening.
Good. Yeah, it's really important to talk about because it's so not understood or misunderstood. And it's so widespread now. I mean, it's so normal. Um, every person in a prominent public position is going to have a multitude of clones at this point. I mean, it's not even a question. It's just a standard practice for everyone. Um, so, you know, politicians, like really mainstream artists, anybody who's really like driving culture in a very mainstream way is going to have a bunch of clones. They're going to have actors replacing them. There's so much deception and trickery, and unfortunately, it's just part of how things are now. Because the human governments have acquired a lot of the Draco technology now, and in some situations are acting with close to the same level of power. So yeah, at least since the 60s, cloning has been getting more and more common, and consciousness transfer has been getting more common. I should say it's not always permanent. So it's not always as I'm describing it, which is this kind of irrevocable thing where you're just like, oh, that's your life now. There are forms of it where you're just projected into another body for a matter of minutes or hours. So yeah, there are much more localized forms of it. Particularly when you're dealing with clones. I mean, people are in and out, souls, the real person is in and out of a clone body all the time, and it's quite fluid. Yeah.
What are the maybe biological differences? Obviously, if you're cloning, it's through DNA, so it's going to have the same DNA in the body. But what types of differences or malfunctions can happen through cloning, whether it's one time or even down the road? I would guess there'd be more malfunctions if they just continue cloning the same exact DNA over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's quite problematic, and many civilizations across the eons have discovered this. Most like sentient species go through this process at some point and realize how dangerous it is, hopefully. But yeah, so the average lifespan of a modern clone is 6 or 7 years. So they have to be replaced pretty regularly. Yeah, it's not like you can just have a functional clone for an entire, 90-year human lifespan. That's not going to happen. Um, there are various explanations for that, and I'm not super well versed in this scientifically, but there's something happening at the mitochondrial level where it's not exactly accelerated aging, but it's sort of like that. Yeah, they basically break down over time, and they have to be replaced and replaced and replaced. So if somebody prominent is being cloned, they're going to have backup after backup after backup. It's not a permanent thing at all. Yeah. There are more permanent arrangements, like if you're dealing with an android body, that could last for, much longer than 90 years. So there are different ways that this comes about. Yeah. But a full organic copy clone is only going to be good for 6 or 7 years usually. That was the case with my mother. I mean, her clones kept breaking down. My mother was cloned quite a few times, um, and yeah, I mean, like clockwork, every 6 or 7 years, like she would become completely incoherent and have to be replaced. So that I have firsthand experience with that. Yeah.
And you mentioned accelerated aging. So I think when people picture a clone being made, they're picturing the same type of growth that a normal, let's just say they're cloning a human, that they would start as a baby. They age the same way that the host body did, that it was cloned from. And so that's not the case from what you're saying. They figured out a way. If they need somebody that's 70 years old tomorrow, maybe not tomorrow, but if they need somebody to replace somebody that's really old, they can accelerate that quickly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of there are different ways to make a clone, but typically they start from infancy and they age at an accelerated rate, or sometimes they age progress people. So there's age regression and age progression. So they can, just basically put people in a machine. They walk in and they're a toddler and they come out and they're 30 years old, So there's also that going on. What I would really like is for an actual clone scientist to go public and start talking about this in more technical detail. Please, if anybody's listening who has that experience, I really urge you to go public because I would really like somebody who's actually an expert in this area to be able to explain it in more detail. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, because you even, not just because people ask you questions, I'm sure like I am, but just for your own sake to be able to understand what you saw, because it's got
Yeah.
to be even, you and so many others who have seen these things firsthand, that's got to be really hard to wrap your mind around it, no matter how hard you sit there thinking about it, just because the science isn't out there.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely glossing over that part, but it was intensely horrifying. Yeah.
I
I mean,
can't.
realizing that the person who I thought was my mother was a freaking clone. I mean, incredibly emotionally devastating experience, absolutely heartbreaking experience. So, yeah, I don't want to downplay that at all because that's taken me years of really intense emotional work to be able to talk so casually about. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine, especially because, it's your mom. It's not just some random person in your life,
Yeah.
somebody that like you love on such a deep level, or at least want to, I know even children that had really abusive parents, their goal was always they wanted to love them. That was what they felt in their heart.
Yeah.
Did you know, or I should say, how did you figure out she was being cloned?
Well, I witnessed parts of the process in moments that I was not supposed to remember. So yeah, I mean, I saw, ooh, I mean, it gets pretty gruesome, but I saw her corpse on various occasions. I saw her tissue being extracted and put into this kind of, I don't know what to call it. I want to say recombinator machine. That's from a computer game called Path of Exile, but I think it's kind of appropriate. Um, yeah, into this recombinator machine that basically, if you have any substantial cellular material from a person, it can reconstruct their entire body. So I saw that happen like in the room with me at at moments, and honestly, I think this was done partly intentionally, like as part of a humiliation ritual to make me feel heartbroken and powerless. So oftentimes I was allowed to witness these things as part of the broader mind control plan, to make me feel less empowered. I've definitely had some moments that are, like the supervillain telling James Bond his plan, like he's just laying it all out. It's like, oh, I've had moments like that where it's like, oh, here's how the sausage is made. And so I saw that with my mother on a few occasions. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was going to be what I was going to ask you. Was her host body still alive, or
Um,
did they clone her because she had passed and they just wanted to continue on her sort of mission?
it's more the latter in her case. But they managed to get a lot of her soul into the clone body.
Mm.
And so she was more animated than you would expect a clone to be. They have varying degrees of success. Basically, they have to trick people into going into the clone body on some level. And for whatever combination of reasons, in my mother's case, they were largely successful. And so her actual mind, the essence of what she actually is, did go into the clone body. So then it was as if she was still there on several occasions. Um, yeah, her actual legal death, by the way, was pretty recent. Um, and yeah, I just want to acknowledge that she did a lot of good work in the world, even as a clone. And yeah, a lot of people loved her. If anybody who is familiar with her work kind of comes across this podcast, I just want to say it doesn't devalue any of the good things that she had done. Um, but yeah, it might be a little shocking. But there was a very obvious, more than a little, but there was a very obvious progression with her. Towards the end of her last clone's life, I mean, she had become completely non-functional. Her soul was basically totally elsewhere. I mean, at that point, it was the classic kind of copy of a copy of a copy thing. And she spent like pretty much her last decade, a little bit more, as a mental patient, totally unable to function on any normal level. But yeah, but that body was a clone body. Yeah,
That's sad. I'm so sorry to hear that. And that had
thanks.
to have been really devastating. There's been a couple of disclosures on this podcast that have been similar. One that I was just thinking of with a dog. They don't know if it was an official clone. They were so little and didn't know about that till they got older, but remembered that the dog kept on being replaced. They'd kill the dog somehow in front of the child, and then all of a
Yeah,
sudden the same dog would appear, whether it was actually a clone or a dog that they bought that looked exactly like it. But
yeah.
hearing how confusing that is, from a child, it makes me really emotional just trying to put myself in your shoes. So I can't even imagine. I'm really sorry that you had to go through that. That had to have been really devastating to heal from.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of this obviously was totally overwhelming for me as a child, and I'm part of the reason I'm talking about it so calmly now is because I've had the opportunity to sit in meditation and basically remote view everything, from a more detached and compassionate adult standpoint. So I've had the chance to review these things in meditation to where I can actually integrate them and understand what was happening.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, which is a lot of what I try to teach other people to do, like other survivors when I'm working with them. That's a lot of what I'm trying to share is like to help people get into that more empowered place, so that you can review your life, with more detachment, more compassion, and not have to like relive the awful trauma every time that you think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think adding the compassion element in, some people that are healing can feel that if I feel compassionate, if I feel forgiving in any way, it means I'm dismissing the abuse. It means that
Mm,
I'm abandoning the wrong that I saw and not standing up for it. When in my
mm,
opinion, it's more like you're sort of cutting that line off that is keeping you connected in such an angry way to something that's not connected to you in the same way.
mm,
Whether we look at people as, a lot of survivors look at their parents as just abusers. They don't really look at them as parents, and if that's the case, the parent's not sitting there feeling so bad about you. Otherwise, they'd try to help you. They'd be there for you. A lot of parents are not. They abandon the survivor as they come forward. And so I think
yeah.
when we hold that anger and don't have some sort of compassion to where this person was an innocent child that was born and they were very, very corrupted and did horrible things. When you can sort of look at it in that lens and like look at people as humans, I think you can sort of like breathe a sigh of relief a little bit and just see them for who they are and realize that something happened to them. They weren't just born thinking, I'm going to have kids and I'm going to do horrible things to them.
Mm,
They were conditioned heavily, just like you were, to do things and never had the opportunity to break free like somebody like you did, which is also just equally devastating to think about how many people were born and then passed and never experienced a whole day of freedom, of love, of having compassion, of not feeling shame for once in their life. And
yeah.
to think about how many people, you look at somebody like you and it's like, gosh, what a freaking miracle that you're able to embody all of this and like experience that, as hard as it might be to overcome a lot of that, to just be able to have those experiences finally. And, I think at the end of the day, you and, every survivor, I think if all parents, if all abusers were to come forward and want to be on this side like you, we'd embrace them. We wouldn't just hate them. And so to have that hate, I think can be sort of a double-edged sword in a way, because sometimes the sword is actually stabbing us and
Yeah.
not the person that we're angry at.
Yeah. Well, it's worth saying for people embarking on this process, forgiveness is always rooted in self-forgiveness, just as love is rooted in self-love. I've had to forgive myself first and last and in between for a whole slew of things. I mean, I was one of these murderers, I'm not necessarily innocent. It's easier to speak about things from a victim perspective, but I was also a perpetrator at many different points. And so a lot of my journey is also about forgiving myself. And that's where it really hits home. Because if you forgive yourself, then forgiving others is comparatively much simpler. Um, yeah.
100%, yes. And like I said, you're a walking miracle. And just seeing you here today with strength, being able to share your story, I know it gives and is going to continue to give so many people hope on the other side of the screen that just feel so debilitated and so unstable and so hurt and in pain. And being able to see somebody like you, that can be life-changing for somebody to be like, gosh, I can be there too with some work. I can have that. So it's so important what you're doing. It's incredible
Oh,
that you're able to do this and be here with us and even laugh during it. Um,
mm,
it's neat to see you with so much strength that you can embody talking about such hard things.
mm. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And so let's go back to talking about sort of the Max and Alandra conjoining. So did that consciousness transfer happen right at birth in 1986 when Alandra was born, or did that
No,
happen at a different point?
no, as I mentioned, it happened when I was about 2.5 in this body. So, um, talk about confusing and overwhelming experiences. That was another big one because not only did I have my initial system, which was already quite fragmented by that point, a lot of the personality fragmentation, I mean, it starts in the womb. It starts very, very early, which I'm sure people who have heard a lot of your podcast will hear that from many different survivors. So by the time I was 2.5, I had at least 6 identifiable alters in my system. And then I had Max come in, and Max was a fully fragmented adult, like polyfragmented, dozens and dozens of alters. So suddenly the number of personalities in my little toddler system exponentially increased. And I definitely went psychotic for a little bit, which is going to happen. um, and yeah, it was a massive out of body experience during that time, like 2.5 to kind of 3.5, 4. I was in a deeper dissociative haze than usual because I was also seeking to integrate this whole other person and all of his likes and dislikes and experiences and everything that goes along with that, and basically being in a psychotic state most of the time, which can be difficult to observe in a toddler. Most of us really don't have the know-how to identify such a thing in a toddler. Like, well, he's saying the usual baby speak. Like, you can't really tell that that person is psychotic, but but I was. I mean, I that was, I mean, still, I mean, it took me, geez, uh, took me a very long time. I'll just say that, to really integrate that experience and even understand any of what had happened. Um, I mean, I thought early in my healing process, like when this body was an older teenager, I'm thinking when I was about 18, after I'd been free for about a year and a half or so on this timeline in this body. I was convinced that I had some extremely malicious alter that I didn't know about. Like I thought Max was an alter. I didn't understand that he was actually a separate person who had been moved into my body. Like that idea was completely incomprehensible to me at that point. I was just like, oh, okay, I have another alter. This must be another part of me. And I tried to work with it on that basis, like as a dissociative identity disorder alter or using internal family systems to try to kind of talk to those parts. And those have great use, but they definitely fall short when you're dealing with a completely other person. So, and yeah, I was very much, I mean, kind of 18 to maybe 28, like a good 10 years. It's pretty safe to say I was wandering around in a lot of confusion and not really understanding any of this stuff that I'm articulating so easily today. So, this is a recent accomplishment of personal healing. Yeah.
And you had mentioned that that transfer was more organic. It wasn't a sort of manufactured or programmed technologically or however transfer of consciousness. Could you explain a little bit about, like, was that part of your programming at that time that somehow that was part of an experiment where they were trying to do that organically, or did that organically happen outside of the conditioning that you were going through?
Uh, well, I was saying that we were part of the same soul, so in that
Okay.
sense, the transfer was easier, but the process was not organic at all. The process was very much um, one moment basically being worked on by a bunch of by a bunch of Zeta Reticulin gray technicians, and then the sensation is uh, it's kind of like being stretched out physically, and then compressed at the same time. Like uh, it's like there's outward pressure and there's inward pressure at the same time. And it's a very, very physically intense experience. Because for a few kind of moments during the process, you're in your physical body, but you're also in your astral body. And even on that level, you're having like conflicting sets of sensation, like within one person as you're being fragmented. So um, it's a tremendously violent experience. And it's experienced like as physical violence. So I don't want to give any impression that this is like a peaceful, organic thing. Um, yeah, it's incredibly painful. And then my Max's consciousness fragmented in several different directions. Part of me was watching it from the outside, which is like a normal dissociative response. Um, Part of me was like Well, one moment, I'm a young man, and the next moment I'm a toddler. Um, and even just trying to get the most basic response from my body, like which I had been accustomed to, became almost impossible. So there's disorientation on that level, kind of on a kinesthetic level, where it's like, oh, I've just lost all of my bodily autonomy, you know, um, and that's no small thing. Um, and then Alandra, this person didn't really, of course, understand any of what was happening because I was an authentic toddler with an authentic toddler understanding of the world. So it kind of, yeah, a bunch of it was a complex experience. Part of my system went underground, as I used to call it, and it didn't really come out again really till adolescence. Um, and that's again, it's another layer in addition to sort of the normal quote unquote trauma-based mind control process. Like I had entire branches of my system, like multiple alters who just completely went underground, as I put it at the time. Um, and and that was not according to a trauma-based mind control plan. Like some of those alters basically had to be remade in a whole different branch of my consciousness after that point. Um, yeah, just I'm just naming some of the things that were happening. Yeah, very devastating, very complex experience. And yeah, I wasn't really on this plane of reality very much for quite a while after that.
That had to have been really hard for Max too, going through that life already as a child himself, growing through
Mhm.
toddler years and going through teenage years, and then all of a sudden being sort of like encompassed and sucked back into this little tiny body that isn't fully developed yet, that can't articulate or, provide for itself in
Yeah,
the same way that he could in his lifetime.
yeah. It's in some ways it's similar to an age regression experience because you have the similar kind of really intense dysmorphia experience when you're age regressed also, and you lose your bodily autonomy in that way. It's also a very violent experience and pretty similar on a lot of different levels. Although age regression is usually you don't come out of that psychotic. Sometimes you do, but it's more. It makes a little more sense to the body, to it's like, oh, because you're still the same person, but you're at a different age. There's my mute again. Yeah.
And this is sort of a twofold question. We had touched on you having the psychic abilities that you were also utilized for at Montauk, which most MK Ultra mind control survivors are, and I'm sure that you were also in both lifetimes. That was something of interest. Could you talk a little bit about that, sort of like what Max's skills were in that, and sort of like how that was utilized, and then also did that transfer over to Alondra when that consciousness transferred? Did you get Max's gifts and his talents that he had from his previous lifetime?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mostly didn't. Uh, yeah, mostly it's only in like my last decade or so that I've actually started to integrate Max's skills in a meaningful way. Mostly they were not integrated. Mostly we were just looking at Alondra's kind of psychic skills.
Yeah.
Uh, and Max's skills were not very accessible. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And was Max at Montauk, did he obviously they're experimenting on consciousness. Did you get used there for things like remote viewing and these different psychic skills that still carry over to the MK Ultra side of things that
Yeah.
Alondra went through? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. But so Max's main job, or the one that sticks out the most in my memory, was as a navigator on ships, particularly on Zeta Reticulan ships, because he was able to use some of the Zeta technology. And most humans were not able to do that because it's all based on you have to use your psychic sense to use the technology. So yeah, I wound up as a navigator, and I would help ships to not get lost in time, space, and dimension. So you have kind of a three-dimensional axis, X, Y, and Z axis of time, space, and dimension. And one of Max's main jobs was to serve as a navigator. Uh, yeah, often totally ignorant of the context or the mission or anything, but just tracking these. Basically, it was a holographic kind of panel that I would interact with, three-dimensional hologram that would determine where the ship was in time, space, and dimension. And I would just, yeah, make sure that we were on the intended course in the intended dimension at the intended time. And that was a big part of how my skills were put to use in that body. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. I know that that's like another thing that people are survivors of these programs are starting to get more comfortable talking about, but that's also been sort of its own community, the psychic community that isn't really sort of intermixed in a lot of this when it really goes
Yeah.
together with the disclosure communities of UAPs, UFOs, all that
Yeah.
stuff. And then obviously the mind control, that's a big part of it. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Much love to all the psychic communities, remote viewing communities that are in your chugging along in your designated boxes of of identity. But yeah, we're all coming together. Yeah.
Well, I know we just sort of started talking about Alandra's life, so I'd love to bring you back on and maybe we spend an episode diving into those experiences, more of your family life, childhood, and obviously the rest of your life and the healing journey. Is there anything else about Max's life that you wanted to share today
Ooh.
that we didn't
Um,
cover? And we can always come back to it next time too if there's stuff, but just wanted to check.
Well, just on a personal note, I send my love to all of the other versions of Max that are not in this body and existing on other timelines. Yeah, we honor each other. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I wanted to give you a minute too. You do deprogramming work. You work with clients. You have an incredibly decorated background just professionally. And then as you've moved into more of working with survivors, I wanted to give you just, a minute or two or however long you want to share about that. Because I'd love if there's people on the other side that need your services to know that you're there and that you're accessible to them and that they can contact you.
Yeah, yeah, I'm here. I'm I'm calling my sessions coaching sessions. It seems like a good general name that includes a lot of different things. Yeah, it can definitely be healing from DID and CPTSD and all the things associated with mind control. It could be general spiritual development work. I teach meditation. I help people kind of come online as an integrated spiritual and human being. Yeah, and I guess I said at the beginning, when I have to use one word, I just say deprogrammer because that seems like the most succinct. Um, yeah, integrating different aspects of experience. I have some clients who have gone through the whole kit and caboodle ritual abuse experience, and I have others who nothing very traumatic happened on this timeline, but maybe they're dealing with another timeline of traumatic events. And that's a particularly difficult thing to make any sense of. So I have some clients who have stuff from other timelines that we're working with. Um, yeah, it's really, I just try to keep myself open, keep an open mind, and it keeps my work exciting because every situation is going to be a little bit different. But obviously, I have a lot of relevant experience to understand some of these things that most healing practitioners wouldn't have. So that's an asset. And then also, I didn't even talk about this, but I do a lot of channeling. I work in tandem with eighth dimensional beings from the Scorpio constellation, Antarean beings, and a variety of other beings as well. As I mentioned, the positive beings in this galaxy, in this universe, greatly outnumber the negative ones. And so the resources that we have are really, really infinite. Yeah, just on that basis, but also then on the basis of tuning into Creator itself, God, Goddess itself, and creating directly from Source, which we're always empowered to do. Yeah, so that's kind of my vibe. That's what I like to do. If that resonates with people, they're welcome to work with me. Yeah.
And this is also if people have just experienced abuse that isn't let's say, mind control, ritual abuse, people who have maybe had domestic violence or
Oh yeah. Oh
different,
yeah.
you can work with any type of trauma survivor, right?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I shouldn't put myself in a box. Haha. Yeah, no, anyone who's called, if you feel it, you feel it. Your body will tell you, your mind will tell you, like, whoa, this guy's onto some stuff, or, he can help me unpack this or that or whatever. I trust people's sense around that stuff, like you always have to follow your heart and trust your gut, when you're choosing any kind of healing practitioner. So yeah, if you have the call, follow the call.
And how can they get in touch with you if they do feel called?
Well, the most direct way is by email, alandra@riseup.net. Ha, now the whole world has my email. That's the most, yeah, that's the most direct way. I have a website for my healing stuff called AntareanJourneys.com, Antarean journeys.com. Oh, thanks. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, I want to update this website a little bit, but yes, it is there. I'm moderately embarrassed by some things that I thought were cool like 10 years ago, but that's just part of growing. All right.
It is
Yes.
cool. And you
Um,
have his email is right on here. You guys can go right on the website, and then there's a little
yeah.
clickable link. It'll probably link it right to your email, I'm guessing. Not to
Hmm.
to yours. It'll take the email, create an email for you. A little page will pop up, and then you guys can send it directly from his website too. So
Yes,
that's wonderful. And
indeed.
I do believe you have some free meditations available for
Hmm.
people as well if
I
they
do.
wanted to
Oh, yeah. I
meditate with
should
that,
also
right?
say, even if you don't want to do any sort of like trauma work or personal healing work, I also host meditation groups, which are just open and by donation. And also that's also an email list if people want to join the groups. Um, yeah, I have a lot of fun with those. Um, and yeah, it really levels up my own meditation as well, when I can do it with others. And I really miss that, because I spent a number of years as a monastic in the Rinzai Zen Buddhist tradition. And it was so awesome just to practice with others. It really raises the energy for everyone when you're doing it together. So I really, really miss that. But I don't have any particular like religious tradition that I'm comfortable with. So now I'm just doing my own thing. Um, and yeah, we have a free thinker meditation together.
That's so wonderful. And same thing, if they want to join that, they can email you at that address.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Poetryuponrequest.com is my website. I write poetry upon request on an old manual typewriter. And oh yeah, I even thought about that at the beginning of the show, because at the beginning of the show you said 6 years, but actually it's been about 20 years
Amazing.
that I've been doing the typewriter thing. Um, and yeah, I'm still yeah, there it is. Thank you. Yeah, I still do that. I do events of all kinds. I I'm I'll travel anywhere. Particularly California or Oregon is easy for me. But if I have my accommodations covered, I will go anywhere and do different events, writing poetry for event guests. Oh, I see. That's where you got the 6 year thing from. Yeah.
Mhm.
But that was like 12 years
A
ago,
while ago. Okay, I didn't know
13.
how old
Yeah.
the website was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a quote from an article that came out at that time. So yeah.
How
Uh,
cool.
yeah, the number is higher now. But oh, I should update this actually. Thanks for bringing my attention there. But yeah, I do events, I do weddings, I do corporate events, I do parties like yeah, that was my main living for a number of years also.
So
Um
cool.
Particularly when I was still on the East Coast. Yeah, I just listed poetry upon request on some wedding planning websites on the Knot and Wedding Wire.
No way, that's so
So
cool.
yeah. So I hope to be doing more weddings and such. Yeah.
I love that. This is really neat, and I'm happy that you're still doing it. And oh, look, you
Yeah.
can access right from this website, which I'll have linked below. He has pictures of his books. You guys can just go and click them, and I'm guessing it'll take them to the page that where they can purchase them.
Yeah, I think so. I have to check on that. I think yeah, I'm not sure if the books are still up. I think they are. Yeah.
Good. Gosh, it's neat to see, and all the different ways that you've taken the things that you inherently loved as a child that you didn't get to explore in a way that was positive for you. All your gifts were really exploited for them, and it's really neat to see you take all that back and use your gifts the way that they were intended to be, and in a
Oh,
way that's really helpful and that's giving back to humanity and helping people heal.
thank you. Oh yeah, while we're talking about things, I should give a brief announcement that I'm doing some conferences. There's the Full Disclosure Now conference coming up next month in Florida, July 15th to 18th. It's organized by Brian and Ada, and it's all dedicated to super soldiers. So most of the speakers are super soldiers or people who have direct experience with that. And it's really the first conference exclusively dedicated to that I'm aware of. This is the second year that it's happening. Last year was the first year. So I was there last year. I'm going to be this year. I'm going to be presenting a few things. I'm going to be on a panel discussion about the Secret Space Program. And I'm going to give a presentation about how to stay grounded as a trauma-based mind control survivor. So yes, full disclosure now dot live, I think is the site. Yeah.
So, in other words, no matter what it is, if you guys need somebody to talk about this stuff, whether it's through poetry, music, whether it's through an online Zoom group or a conference, you have your guy Laundry here who is available for all of it. And you see he does it all. That is really awesome. Congratulations. That's great to see
Thank you.
you being invited to speak at events. You're just a really natural speaker and you're so good at breaking all this stuff down. So I'm really happy you're being recognized for that.
I appreciate that.
That's terrific. And so maybe you could send me that website and I can put it down below. So if people want to sign
Sure.
up for that, if they're interested,
Yes.
or do you guys do an online live stream? Do you know?
Yeah, there's a live stream also.
Oh, great. Okay, so if you can't make it, you guys can still watch it from your laptops or phones. So I'll have that link below, and that's great.
Hmm.
Yay. And so I'll have all your other websites. I encourage you guys, a lot of you guys ask, how can I help support survivors? Well, take their content and share it with a friend. If you guys know a survivor that could benefit from his services, if you are a survivor and need help or guidance or are looking for somebody, hire a survivor. Buy his book, support him, follow him on social media. There's so many different ways that you guys can bring survivors into the bigger picture and help give them a safe space to explore their talents and the knowledge that they have in a way that's really productive and that's beautiful. And so many more people are waking up to this, survivors and advocates, allies, therapists, and wanting to learn more. So it's really wonderful that we have people like Alandra who are willing in so many ways to help us get on sort of the right path with learning about the world that we live in. So I really appreciate you, Alandra. Is there anything else that you wanted to share today before we wrap up?
Uh, I do get out regularly with the poems. I'm at the Mount Shasta Farmers Market every Monday,
Are
if
you?
anybody's coming through Northern California. Yeah, Mondays 3:30 to 6, writing poems.
That is so cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, if you
Yeah.
guys are up there visiting, if you guys are in California, go check that out. I know I would if I lived there. That would be so cool. And I really appreciate you coming on. I'm excited for a part two and to share more about your harrowing but inspiring story.
Me too.
And so for everybody listening, once again, I'll have all Alondra's links in the show notes for you guys. If you guys are looking for help deprogramming, just want some relief and want to join a meditation group and maybe make time for that, I'll have that website up. I'll also have his email. You guys can contact him directly, whether it's for that or if you want to reach out and give him some encouragement. I always encourage you guys to do that too. Go tell him how he's affected you and changed your life. And if you have some puzzle pieces for him, that can help contribute to his story, reach out. It's always good when survivors can connect with each other as well on that level.
Yeah.
If you guys are looking for poetry, all of it, I'll have all of his websites below. So I'd love for you guys to go connect with him. And are you on social media, by the way? I know you have a
I
Twitter.
am. Yeah, I'm on most of the things.
Okay.
Instagram, Facebook,
Just your name,
Reddit.
right?
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
Alandra Markman. All one word is my Instagram handle. And then Facebook is the same, Alandra Markman. Yeah.
Great. I'll have that all in the show notes too. And that's another way you guys can support. Just go give him a follow, share his content. Great way that you guys can help and it doesn't take hardly any time or money or effort. So I'll have all that in the show notes as well. Connect with me on different platforms. I never know who's going to keep me up or take me down. So if you guys could connect with me on places like Rumble as well as YouTube, if you guys are watching on one or the other, BitChute, iTunes, Spotify, Substack. Follow me wherever you guys can, just in case a platform decides that they're not happy with me talking about this stuff again. So I'll have all that in the show notes, you guys. We couldn't do this without you. We're so grateful for all your love and support. Thank you for listening. Bless you all, and we will see you next time.